Hello everyone. So I took these models out of my lead mountain to paint up as a little bit of an experiment. I wanted to try to use my newly acquired acrylic paint pens to see how they would perform doing some heraldry on some medieval figures, and it didn't work out at all. I found it the paint sort of ran a little bit too freely, and my sort of skill at drawing heraldic animals and etc. wasn't up to it, so I resorted to the transfers that came with the figures. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but ended up with 3 figures that I was quite pleased with, but the whole thing has now tripped me up, and I've gone down the most almighty rabbit hole that I've been carefully avoiding for something like 40 years. And again, you'll see that I'm not exaggerating when I show you a few items that I purchased about 40 years ago later on. But I thought I'd start this video by just showing you these three figures separately, and talking a little bit about Sir William Marshall, who is all 3 of them represent Sir William Marshall at a tournament. So you have him with a lance, and the lance is tipped with what's known as a coronal, so it's designed deliberately to be fragile and to break on impact rather than to puncture the opponent. And you also have him on horseback with a handheld weapon, so a sort of melee weapon, and you have the same pose, if you like, the same weapon in his hand with the figure on foot. And they all these figures are still available from Curtis or First Corps. I always get those 2 confused because sometimes they seem to have separate websites and sometimes not, and they're always together at trade shows, and the trade stands are combined at shows and so on. But at the moment it's a single website, and you can still acquire these figures there. But the rules that they were intended for, which are set rules called cross lances, which were jousting rules, don't appear to be available any longer. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that later on in this video. Yeah, just to talk a little bit though, first of all, about Sir William Marshall, a quite extraordinary figure in history. We know a lot about his life because after his death, a sort of poetic story, chanson as it were, sort of heroic work was written, sort of detailing the events in his life, but it clearly intended to extol his virtues. So it's not an entirely it is factual, but it's not. It's sort of definitely leans towards the heroic kind of applause of his life, and leaves out all the dubious parts, I suppose, and the mistakes that he made. But nevertheless, he did have the most incredible life story. He seemed to manage to take part in all the major events in the sort of Angevin Empire, as it was, throughout what was a very long life. So even as a boy, he was born at the time of the anarchy, the civil war between Stephen and Matilda, and his father was on the side of the Empress Matilda. He was the second child of a second marriage, so as such wasn't in line to take over his father. I think his father's name was Hugh. Any of his father's lands and so on. So he was a little bit expendable in that regard, and he was given over as a hostage to King Stephen in order that Hugh Marshal, his father, could enter a castle of his at Newbury that was under siege, supposedly to make arrangements for the castle to surrender. But Hugh immediately, as soon as he got into the castle, immediately reneged on the agreement, and William Marshal's life was forfeit. Excuse me, at the age of only 4 years old, and he very nearly did get put on the gallows and executed in front of the castle, but Stephen was quite a sort of lenient character, and Hugh Marshal was probably relying on his leniency, and William survived, but his extraordinary career could have been cut short as a boy. And then as a sort of, I think he was about 12 years old, he went across to Normandy and entered the household of William Tankerville, who was a sort of relation of his mother's, I believe, and was sort of raised up, sort of trained to the knighthood, fought in one campaign that William Tankerville took part in, when some armies from the sort of northeast and France area, Boulogne, that kind of area, Flanders, invaded Normandy. Acquitted himself well in that, but then for some reason sort of fell out of favour with William Tankerville, and set off on the sort of jousting tournament scene trail, which was very prevalent in northeastern France at the time. Tournaments at one point were forbidden in England, and again he had sort of mixed fortunes in that, but he did come out of it having won a few sort of prizes, horses and things that he took as ransom from people that he had dismounted and beaten in tournaments, and then entered the service. I think it was the Earl of Salisbury. Ended up in Aquitaine, which at the time was ruled by Eleanor of Aquitaine, who became the wife of Henry II. So he found himself from then on at the centre of politics, Western European politics. Was captured, having made a very kind of heroic defence in a war between Aquitaine and Poitou, trying to sort of put down a sort of rebellious insurrection that was taking place, which was mainly led by the Lusignans. And then Eleanor of Aquitaine actually paid his ransom because of either because he had come to her attention in the court, or because she had heard of the heroic fight that he put up, at which the Earl of Salisbury was killed, by the way. And then he sort of entered the household of Aquitaine. He served the son of Henry II, who was another Henry, who was actually crowned as king during Henry II's lifetime, so that Henry II could ensure the succession to his throne. So theoretically, this other Henry would have been Henry III of England, well, England and Duke of Aquitaine and so on, but he died before Henry II. But in theoretically, he was Henry III. He's not known as Henry III. But anyway, so he served that king, in inverted commas. He served Henry II, Richard the Lionheart, John. He was a guarantor of the Magna Carta, and then was a sort of regent of England when Henry III succeeded his father, King John, as a boy, and defeated the invading French army. He led the army that defeated and threw the French out of England during the sort of turbulent period at the end of King John's reign and the beginning of Henry III's reign. In the meantime, he had found time to go on crusades. He ended his life as a member of the Templar order, so he is buried in the church near the Strand in London. There you can still see his effigy there. Absolutely extraordinary life. At one time he brought the future King Richard, down in a sort of conflict, a sort of one-on-one fight that took place in a battle when Richard was rebelling against Henry II. So rather than kill the future king, he actually dipped his lance at the last moment and brought Richard's horse down. Absolutely amazing life, packed full of incident and adventure. As I say, even disregarding a lot of the spin that the sort of epic poem puts on his life, it's nonetheless still an extraordinary career. Anyway, I've gone on long enough about William Marshall. So now, what is the big rabbit hole that I've gone down? Well, I'm going to start collecting sort of figures together for what I describe as feudals. So I've already got quite a few medieval figures. I've got armies for the 100 Years' War and for the Wars of the Roses and for the Crusades, but this is something completely separate. What I consider feudals to be, or what I'm defining it as, is the sort of period in history from the late Norman period, so the time of the Troubles, the anarchy, the war between Stephen and Matilda, up to around the sort of beginning of the 100 Years' War, and mainly, or well, in my case, entirely centred on England and France, and so although the period overlaps with things like the Crusades, I'm considering it a completely separate project, and I'm going to kind of incorporate into it a lot of the sort of legendary elements of the period. So things like Ivanhoe from the Walter Scott novel, and Robin Hood, that kind of thing. So it's not going to be any entirely kind of historical project. It's going to incorporate a lot of sort of storytelling kind of elements as well. So next up then, I'll talk a little bit about these rules, crossed lances, and the sort of rules that these figures were originally intended for. Right, some time ago now, at Salute, I think it must have been 2014, I purchased this set of rules called Crossed Lances from First Corps stroke Curtis. They're a set of rules intended for jousting, written by Martin Knight and Peter Bradford. And it just caught my eye. I like to pick up fresh things at Salute, embark on new projects based on things I see at the show, and took these up and painted. I bought all the accessories to go with it as well, and painted up these three figures here, and almost instantly gave up on the project. The reasons being numerous. First thing I found incredibly difficult was to make use of the transfers. Originally it struck me transfers a really great idea for representing intricate heraldry on figures, because my painting skills aren't up to doing it, but the transfers were really impractical, trying to get them to adhere to the sort of folding surfaces of the figure and the horse and so on, was bad enough, and I didn't make a very good job of it. But also the transfers are the type where you have to apply them to a white background. They're transparent, so if you apply them to a darker background, it sort of mutes or conceals entirely the colours on the design of the transfer itself. So that means that you're instantly presented with the problem that you have to paint the figure afterwards using colours that match the colours on the transfer itself, and that can be a problem. So that is why I started with this particular character, whose name escapes me for the moment, sorry, because white is a fairly easy colour to reproduce, so it wasn't such a problem. But I had far more difficulty when I was painting up William Marshall just recently, but I was put off doing any more, really, because I was a bit daunted by the task, and never even got round to reading these rules. But I think it's fair to say that they weren't a roaring success. As I say, they don't appear to be in print any longer, And also, as I say, I bought so much, accessories. I had another two knights to add. I got four in total. So I've got Sir Maurice de Berkeley and John de Vere, the Earl of Oxford here. And you can see with the transfers on the Baron Berkeley's there, how do you go about painting the rest of the horse, the caparison on the horse? Do you just have it as a red colour and forget about all the little gold crosses and the ermine chevron, just have that as a central? I think that's the only practical way of doing it, but not easy. And as you can see, £20 for each of these blisters. You get 3 figures, 2 horses, all the transfers you need, and bases as well. Now, an indication of how how badly cross lances sold is that you can now get this set. Don't know if it comes in a blister pack any longer because it won't have the heading cross lances, but you can get all that now for £14.40, I believe, on First Corps or Curtis website. So and it's not advertised as being for a jousting game, despite the fact that all the figures have that coronel on the lance tip. They're just sold as early medieval knights now. I also got Sally Forth did a lot of the aids, so I purchased these hexagons, which there are basically 2 parts to the game. There's the tilt, where the figures with the lances are tilting at one another, but there's also a grand tourney, and you need these where sort of multiple figures join in, and you need these hexagons for that. I've got a horrible feeling now that these hexes will only do me for 1 figure. I'm not sure, I don't know. And if that's the case, then they're not available anymore, but that cost another £6. And then Sally Forth also did this tilt barrier, which is quite nice, but again it cost me £20 at the time. It is on the Sally Forth website still, and it sells for about £16 now, I think, but you have to really search for it. I've just had another look to confirm the price that it's retailing at now, and can't find it. Sally Forth's website is a little bit difficult to navigate, and it's now a little bit obscure, but you can still get hold of this. And the rules themselves I have tried to read recently, and I don't know how they work as a game. It strikes me that it will be quite a good game to play, but the rules are just really badly written. Really, it's the English in them. It reads a bit like instructions you get with a lot of appliances and so on that were produced in China. And yeah, it wasn't. This is published in the UK, but it reads like it's been written by in a foreign language and then translated into English. It's just so difficult to understand and read, which might be another reason why it didn't receive kind of universal favour. And of course, this price reduction for all these things after 8 years, it kind of contradicts my usual policy of buying things when they're available. These rules and some of these accessories aren't available any longer, and I often buy things while they're available, partly because they won't be available when I want to get around to playing the game, and partly because it would normally save me money, and quite the reverse. I could have, if I'd waited 8 years, I could have got these £6 cheaper. But anyway, now I want to get into feudals. This is going to be quite a good sort of gateway set of rules into the period, because I've already got enough figures to play a small preliminary game. All I've got to do is paint this up and I'm good to go with a kind of small scale game, and then get these painted up as well, and I can move on to the grand tourney and play that. So, you know, for the time being, this is going to be my you know, sort of first steps into the period. And I've already, although I'm trying to, you know, whittle down my lead mounting, I've already started making some purchases for figures specifically for jousting and playing this set of rules. Not these from First Corps, but some from CP models, bystanders and things like that, as well as some jousting knights that were originally sold by Steve Barber. But where to after cross lances as I begin to expand my collection of figures? Just before I go on, a correction to something I said a moment ago. I said I was looking for this jousting tilt barrier on the Sally Forth website, and the reason I couldn't find it on the Sally Forth website is that it's actually sold now through Curtis and First Corps, so it's on their website, and it isn't £16, it isn't even £14. You can pick it up now for £12, so it's actually £8 less than I paid for it 8 years ago. So that's pretty embarrassing for me, really. Okay, so I mentioned that I've long had a hankering to get into this period. I wonder how many of you remember this old game here from Standard Games called Cry Havoc. It was a kind of hex-based game using tokens to represent the figures and things. I'm not really big into board games, and I wasn't even when I picked this up. This is pretty hard to get hold of nowadays, by the way. They also had a game called Siege, which was a sort of an extension of this game. I haven't got that. But I'm, as I say, not very big on board games, but I was intending to try and play with figures. Again, this we're probably talking around mid 1980s, and I did pick up, again, this is a bit of a blast from the past, I did pick up a lot of figures, which, as you can see, are still in their blisters 40 years on. Let's get them all out and then discuss these a little bit. Yeah, as you can see, got quite a lot, and they have been in my lead mountain all that time, unopened. Yeah, I got these from a kind of war game shop. Again, something that's not very common entity nowadays, and the reason the tops have all been cut off is that I don't understand it entirely, but these are, or were, Citadel miniatures, and they had a Games Workshop product, and they had the Games Workshop, I think, logo on the top of it, and this was at the time when Games Workshop were beginning to open shops around the country, and the proprietor of the shop I bought these from was legally obliged, I think, not to sell things under the Games Workshop label, which is why they are cut off like that. But you can see the price I paid for them. They're £2.50 for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 figures, I think, in there. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I think there's 5 figures in there. Now this does, prove my point about buy things when they're, at the time, and save money when you get around to painting them years later. But this is a prime example. These figures are still available from, you might recognize them from Wargames Foundry. I'm pretty sure they must have been designed by the Perry twins. They are now, I think they're described as Baron's War on the Wargames Foundry website, but they're now not sold in these sort of groupings, and they're not slaughter bases as these figures are, but they're all identical. They're all identical figures, and this is a real kind of treasure trove, really, in my lead mounting. As I say, I got them at around the same time as I bought Cry Havoc, with the intention of playing Cry Havoc with figures, and it was a project that never got off the ground. But ever since, I've always wanted to sort of put together some armies for the feudal period. There's just so much in here that I am now. This is going to be my next step after I've got sort of cross lances off the ground, is to then crack on with these and get these all painted up, and then see about another set of rules. So what are the rules that I am likely to play? Well, Lion Rampant obviously is a good place to start. It's a nice simple set of rules that will make use of the sort of army sizes that I'm likely to begin with. I'm not going to have a massive collection of figures for a while, so it's a good set of rules for that. But funnily enough, this is the second edition. I would have been more sort of tempted with the original set of rules. The new set of rules has really extended the time period that it covers. It goes back to the sort of Dark Ages and right through to the Wars of the Roses, whereas this is sort of precisely the sort of time period that I had in mind. But it's good, as I say, it's a good place to start. They're not a bad set of rules. They're fairly simplistic. It makes them easy to pick up. But at the end of the day, I'm after something a little bit more time period specific and a little bit more sophisticated. And as you may have seen on an earlier video I put up, I picked up the Baron's War set of rules while I was at Colours the other weekend, and Death and Taxes. You may notice now that on the front cover of the Baron's War is a depiction of William Marshall himself in his distinctive heraldry. But yeah, this is exactly the right period, and will match the figures from that I've just shown you a moment ago very well. All these figures in here, I would imagine a footsore, because these rules accompany footsore's figures and Kickstarter. And the supplement, this gets me on to the next ambition. One of the supplements, Death and Taxes, has in here army lists and so on for outlaws, and sort of Robin Hood kind of feel to some of these army lists, and that is exactly what I wanted to then extend myself into. So I purchased and added, unfortunately, to my lead mounting, some figures that I got from Sally Forth. They do their own figures, Legends of Sherwood. So I got the Robin Hood starter set and the Sir Guy starter set. There are quite a few figure manufacturers who do Robin Hood figures, but I particularly like the look of these. They're slightly kind of heroic scale, so a little bit bigger than those Perry ones that I showed you a moment ago. But yeah, I thought these were really nice figures. I'll show you the Robin Hood starter set as well. So this has got these figures for the Sir Guy, are kind of more generic looking, you know, sort of Norman helmet type look to them. But these ones are specific characters like Friar Tuck and Maid Marian there and so on. But combined with, you know, other ranges and other figures, you know, I can get some more kind of generic looking outlaws and so on to go with them. So that's going to be the beginning of my Robin Hood project. And again, quite a few years ago now, probably a couple of years ago, you might have seen that I purchased a mat which was a forest floor, and I never said at the time what I had in mind for that mat, but it was, again, because, you know, I was feeling the itch to do some sort of Sherwood Forest type game. So I've got a mat for that. And then at Colours, last weekend I purchased as well a mat from Deep Cut, which was a cobblestone mat, which again, this is where all things have sort of come together at the same time and just tipped me over the edge into this rabbit hole. Is I bought sort of cobblestone mat, and that was because there were two separate Kickstarters for 3D STL files for medieval buildings that I've pledged for at the moment. And my aim is to kind of build up a sort of medieval streets. Maybe then another thing I've got in mind is another project that I've never got off the ground really, is sort of Three Musketeers type of thing. So to do a sort of 17th century Paris kind of streets. So the mat will be good for that as well, and a lot of the medieval buildings would look all right, set in a later period in Paris as well. So, but for the time being, I've got in mind to, you know, print up some buildings and make a sort of streets of Nottingham or something like that. So lots of things, you know, planned and so on. Let's see how long this goes on before I get dragged into yet another you know, project that I get enthusiastic about. But for the time being, you know, I'm pretty close to being able to start with a game of crossed lances now. So you know, tiny steps to begin with, and then this is my ultimate goal. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. See you on the next video. Bye for now.